Our society was a Jim Crow society. We were living during the period of Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a case that legitimized racial segregation. And that could have been a condition that repelled me and could have caused me to be depressed and not feel I could achieve. But the influences that were provided to me that impacted me while in Youngstown from the time I was just a kid had the opposite effect. I was inspired by individuals, inspired by opportunities that were presented in order for me to conclude that I was not a part of the caricature that had been described for black people. I just refused to allow others to define me. Sunday afternoon forum meetings at which outstanding speakers came and addressed the issues of the day, notably the racial issues. Though I was a sub-teen and then later a teen, I was in the audience. My mother took me to those forums and I sat on the first row and listened to the speakers. Later I had a chance to meet the speakers and shake their hands, and that encouraged me. Living in a period of Jim Crow and segregation need not be the final verdict. And so I was always inspired to work for change, but that inspiration came to me even though I was living in an environment in Youngstown that was not so conducive to that. There were other forces that encouraged me to believe that other things, progress notably, could be achieved. There were some unwritten rules that govern relationships with neighbors of the opposite race. One of our playmates was a boy who lived up on the corner in a very well-to-do house. He was being raised by his grandmother, and we would be having a great time out playing. And then I'd hear this voice bellow from the back porch of that big house, "Bobby, get in here." And that's when she would see him playing with black kids, and she would summon him to the house. And his feathers just fell. He said, "Oh, I've got to go in." Well, he had to go in because his grandmother looked out there and saw him playing with black kids. That was a tragedy for that kid. And what I came to conclude, not only then but later, that condition, that segregation, was a condition that was offensive to whites as well as blacks, and it would take courage on the part of blacks to help whites understand. And I was in the role sometimes of helping whites understand why they couldn't play with us. And as I look back, I see how senseless, and many whites that I talked to about what things were like in my youth, they agree it was senseless, and I think without question, many of them are embarrassed. I never thought of courage with regard to things I was doing. I felt strongly that certain things were wrong, and they had to be rectified. And if it was within my power to raise an issue about it, I would do it. And it got me in trouble sometimes. So I went to South Africa. And then I met widows, four widows in fact, whose husbands had just been murdered, and their bodies were found in shallow graves on the beach. And I went and I met with these widows at the cemetery early one morning, and they were so glad that I was there. And they asked me, was there anything I could do as a judge? They had never seen a judge before, had never seen a black judge. And as I explained, I had no jurisdiction here. There's nothing I can do. But I can tell you what we did in our country. And then I told them briefly the story of slavery and the abolitionist movement and how whites came together with blacks to challenge the system of slavery and of the Civil War and the constitutional amendments. And I just very lightly went through those phases of our history and assured them that the same thing's going to happen in South Africa. You're going to have your freedom. I can't say when, but you're going to have it, just as we in the United States struggled to get it, and we are still struggling. That he played a similar role in the evolution of black political power in this country. Through his reportage and his focus as a journalist from way back up through his time with Ebony and Jet, he created a level of awareness and consciousness about potential of black political possibilities that no one else had done and no one else has since done. And to that extent, I think he was instrumental in the election of Barack Obama as president, because he created such a sense of strength, of the potential of strength of black voters, that it was not deemed unthinkable when Barack Obama announced that he was going to run for president. Simeon Booker, I think history will record, after it has a chance to let the smoke clear, after President Obama leaves office and people come to really realize what a historical miracle this was for Barack Obama to be elected president. They'll see, as they look back to try to figure out what elements came together to make that possible, they will conclude that this reporter in Washington by the name of Simeon Booker, through the years, put together a web of knowledge and information that spurred candidates to believe that they could win, in this case President Obama, and in the minds of others that was possible for a person of color to win. And that coming together, I think, created a legacy that has destroyed the notion that it's impossible. And I know all of my life, the emphasis was upon learning, knowledge, study, preparation, learning how to think. Education was a value. It was a pathway to success. When persons think of President Obama, I mean his critics, they condemn the fact that he is a graduate of the Harvard Law School and was editor-in-chief of the Law Review, which is a huge, huge accomplishment. The smear that was directed at him, that he was not an American, and that he should produce his school transcript. Here's a man who has done everything that the American dream seeks to encourage. He overcame the struggle of living in a single family, single parent home. He goes to college and he finds himself eventually and goes to Columbia and graduates, and then he goes to Harvard and does all those things at Harvard, comes back to Chicago and works as a community organizer, working with people. He runs for office against all kinds of odds, and then he becomes the President of the United States, only to be, then he marries, beautiful wife, smart, talented, 2 lovely daughters. The friends I had as a youngster here in Youngstown, the fraternity that I joined at Youngstown College and Youngstown University, the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, has a pledge that we repeated at every meeting as to purpose. It says the purpose of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity is achievement. And that's true not just of that fraternity, but of all these fraternities and sororities that were involved, that black families and black persons have involved themselves in, that the churches, through their youth programs, emphasized for young people to achieve, get an education. I think we have to regard respect as a noble goal. Respect for differences. Respect for views that we don't necessarily share. Respect for humanity. Working to relieve pain of all kinds that people are suffering. I would like to be thought of as and have the name stir this thought that that one need not be perfect in order to be good. I by no means am perfect, or have I lived a perfect life, but I have tried to be good. And if that goodness, if those efforts at goodness have brought an improvement in the human condition, I think that my living has not been in vain.